Hello again. How have you been? Everything good? Is life treating you well? I hope you've been keeping healthy. I've been thinking today about disease, actually. So, one of my favorite things to do is to go on about ways the world might end. One of my favorite and / most terrifying is disease. Now, this is not to say that it will actually kill the world, but kill us, fully sentient creatures that could appreciate the world on the same level. There are diseases out there that can kill us. A lot of them. Some of them are really scary. And this is a common thing in games. I've seen a number of games do things with diseases. Everything from lycanthropy to, plagues that are, killing off thousands of people. So it's something that games use a lot as well. And I think that's an understandable thing to do. Because history, right? We've got lots of history about how disease ruins the world. Bear with me. So, for instance, everybody's heard of the Black Death. Bubonic plague killed, depending on which version of the history books you buy, anywhere from a third to almost half of the population of Europe in a very short amount of time. That's insane. That's crazy talk. Pure nuttiness. We don't have a conception of anything like that now. It's not the only example, of course. The Great Dying, which is the time period after the Europeans showed up to, the North and South America, and, we had these diseases they'd never heard of and didn't have any antibodies for, and so lots and lots and lots of people died. So many, in fact, it's almost impossible to get an accurate count. Entire tribes, peoples, cities, communities, just gone. Even more recent, Spanish influenza. Lots of people are aware of Spanish influenza. Killed millions of people. It's terrible. And that was at the beginning of the 20th century. A lot of returning soldiers from World War I carried it with them to North America. There are other diseases. Polio, smallpox, thankfully we've gotten rid of, although it still exists in some vials somewhere, but we've gotten rid of, it as a thing that floats around in human populations. Thank you. Vaccination. So, these are things that people are aware of. And so, of course, you bring diseases into a game. Now, sometimes it's done well and sometimes not so well. A lot of the diseases that you saw in D&D were kind of, Sometimes somebody would come up with something specific. Here's a disease that causes this symptom, and this is how it progresses, and so on. But a lot of times it's like, this just gives you these negatives and you're sick. Sorry. And, that's fine. Not every disease is that terrible. The reason the disease was on my... somebody decided to contact me from far, far away. India, perhaps? Anyways, where was I? Oh, yes! So, the reason this is on my mind is because there's been a lot of news coverage of Ebola. And Ebola is a scary disease. It really is. But it's scary for its special effects. Honestly. The way it kills you is awful. You bleed to death internally and throughout your eyes, and nose, and ears, and mouth. You have blood everywhere because your body's basically liquefying itself. You're dying. Crazy talk. Dying. Movie style dying. It's awful. It's also not terribly contagious. Yes, there are like 800 people with it in West Africa, but here's the thing with that. So, West Africa is not, as fully developed an infrastructure. It doesn't have as wealthy a population. There aren't as many doctors. There's not as much education there. There's not as much mass communication as what we experience here in North America, England, most of Europe. So those work against it. It's much, I don't want to be insulting towards the West African nations, but in a lot of ways they are dealing with the same circumstances of diseases in the 19th century. There might have been ways of dealing with some of the diseases that were floating around, but there weren't enough resources built up, enough knowledge base, enough infrastructure to adapt to those things. Ebola is only passed through blood, as near as anyone can tell, and coming in contact with blood after they've started showing those symptoms. So it's actually relatively easy to avoid. You don't, you just wash your hands, wear gloves, and protective gear. So people say, well, why are doctors getting sick and all this? Because it's overloaded the system. Their system isn't designed to handle that level of problem. That's part of it. Another part of it is education. A lot of people don't believe that Ebola is a disease, that it's a real thing in West Africa. Some people think it might be witchcraft, or maybe, the Western powers lying to keep them down, because those kinds of conspiracy theories do float around. But there are a lot of reasons why Ebola is spread fast that have nothing to do with how contagious it is. People are terrified because there are a couple of people in the United States who now who have it. But they are also in a place where enormous infrastructures to deal with disease. An enormous amount of education. And too many doctors, honestly. So, when you have that situation, you put them into that situation, the chances of it spreading are almost nil. Ebola is scary because of the way it kills you, but it doesn't spread that fast. Flu kills more people than Ebola has ever killed. Every year. AIDS has killed more people. Tuberculosis has killed more people. Tuberculosis, there is now a drug-resistant version of tuberculosis out there. It kills more people than Ebola. There are lots of other things that are scarier just by the numbers of people that it kills. But we're not as afraid of them. One, because we're familiar with them. They aren't as strange and unusual. And two, the way they kill you is not as, doesn't have the same level of special effects to it. It's not as movie villain, bad killing, It's not like something out of a zombie flick. You get a cold, you get a flu, and you get a chest cold, you get pneumonia, you die. It sucks. But it's not that same kind of visceral terror of watching somebody's eyes bleed. And that's why we're not as afraid of it. Now, I'm going to wrap this around and bring it back to games for a second. Why Ebola isn't as scary here, in practical terms, is because we have the science and education to back it up. We can go, all right, we can deal with this. You would have to have thousands upon thousands of people with it to start overloading our system's ability to absorb that. Games like D&D have magic. And magic heals diseases much simpler than any sort of herbal remedies or even the knowledge, even science. Science is our magic here, honestly. Our scientific ability, our medical knowledge allows us to absorb a lot more of that problem. We can resist it more because we've got all of these resources, and it's like our magic, which is the number of spells we can cast that fix that problem. When you're thinking about a disease in your game, you need to think about it in two ways. One, can it be cured by magic? And honestly, it probably should, because then if you can't cure it by some form of magic, then you're disabling that aspect of the world, and that can be very off-putting to people who say, play a healer. It means that they are useless. It's like, here's a major villain of the world that can't be fought with swords. Well, all your fighters are going to be a little annoyed with you. You mean I can't fight them with, like, swords and axes and stuff? No. What am I supposed to do? Just stand there? Watch while the wizard casts spells? That's going to be annoying. The same sort of thing. So you don't want it to be that, but you want it to be more difficult. And you need to address at what point are the resources of all the healers in a particular area overwhelmed. What's going on in West Africa is the healing resources in West Africa are overwhelmed by the sheer number of problems going on there. There aren't enough infrastructures to deal with what's going on. There aren't enough healers. There aren't enough clerics going around to cast the spells. And God, this sounds weird to talk about it in these terms because it's a dread and terrible thing. 800 people are dead, and it's probably going to cross over 1,000 easily before it's all said and done. But the principle still applies. Their resources are being overwhelmed. If you want to do a disease in a game, don't necessarily think in terms of how is it, can this be cured with magic? Well, sure, powerful enough healer, they can heal it in some manner. How quickly can you spread it should be a better measure. If you've got a church of such and such that's got a bunch of clerics that can heal things, say, 100 clerics that can heal the disease, but you've got 100,000 people spread over, 1,000 miles, or however many people over however much space, you begin to tax the resources of what those healers can provide. So you can still create the drama of having that disease out there as a MacGuffin, as a story element that's difficult, not because it can't be cured, but because the cure is limited. There is a limited number of places that cure can be, the limited number of people that can do it, and once you overcome those limits, it becomes a problem. Anyways, that was my thinking on handling diseases in games and a different way of approaching them. Tell me what you think. Am I overthinking it? Am I being oversimplified? Am I being insulting to all the people who are suffering and dying? I hope I'm not. That's not my intent. I'm just trying to sort of take a real-world thing and draw maybe some game uses out of it so that, you can create more interesting stories by using real-world drama. I don't know. That's my thinking. Feel free to subscribe, like, all the usuals. And I'll talk to you later. And stay healthy. Eat an apple. Drink some milk. Be healthy.